So integrating Pyharmonics with OpenAI, I decided to do this. Why? People asked me to do it. They said proof or it didn't happen. Um, so I decided this was not simple enough. I've gotten feedback from some people who are coders who've studied on GPT University and don't like code. So I decided, is there a way to access the library or see these charts better? I thought, will I make a UI? I looked at some of the UI widgets and stuff out there and thought, I'm absolutely not going to do this. Um, and I looked at what I'd done with Pyharmonic so far, which is run it on a Raspberry Pi, connected up to a Discord chat room and post all the patterns it finds there as it finds them. But it's not very interactive. So I designed a Docker and connected up to OpenAI, and let's see how that interaction works. So let's go for a demo. Um, the links are in the video. You're going to need Docker installed on your machine. You're going to need an OpenAI key. Clone the repository, cd into the folder, and edit. There's one of three ways to do it. You can either export the environment variables directly into your environment. They'll stay there for however long you want. Use a .m file, which is my preference. Use a Docker file. I don't do this just in case I accidentally commit it back up. So with the project downloaded, again, you can add your information here. Change the URL if you want to use DeepSeek instead of OpenAI. Your model name can be listed here. Pick any of the model names that are available and put your key in here. Once that's done, it's simply Docker Compose up. And then on localhost 5000, you're going to see a simple HTML page that can take your prompt and pass it on to OpenAI. So I'm going to take a few digs of JavaScript later on, but this isn't Angular or any of that stuff. This is just basic vanilla JavaScript, one page worth of stuff. So if I ask for any patterns for, let's say, this company on the 1 day time frame, that chart, the 1 day candle chart, will be queried and scanned for patterns and presented back to me, like we see here below. So what's happened in the background is what I wrote in English is converted to an API call via the model, and then the results of that API call are converted into instructions for the users again via the model, and this time it's fed back to me. So you can see a bullish pattern occurred, tells you where to buy, where to sell, shows you, if you lose it, if the entire situation fails, and your entire position is stopped out, you will have lost $9. If the first target is hit, you'll be up $2, regardless if the rest stop out. And if you collect 2 or 3 targets is even better, and 3 and 3 targets is the best. So we'll do one more. So BTC on the 1 hour. And again, that will be converted into a query and done. So here we see a bullish pattern. Again, you enter your buy price here, set your stop losses, your targets, yada yada. So that's what it does. So what exactly is happening in the background here? So a couple of things. So we'll just look at the debug. So your query is fed along with this prompt instruction to the model first, so that it knows how to extract your arguments from, how to extract information that can be used to make a function call or an API call. So, and examples of that are given here. And it's expressly told to do it in JSON and not pad with any extra characters. So that allows the English you type in to be examined and converted to this. So you know which function you're going to call and what arguments to give it. And that allows you to execute the call. And then the output from the call is given back to the model with a second prompt. And the second prompt says, at this time you're going to do technical analysis and tell me if the sentiment is bullish or bearish and where is the entry price and so on. And then that plus the plot is fed back to the user. So the API could be anything. It could be weather data, where you ask, is it advisable to go outside today? And based on your location, it could say, hey, it's going to rain and here's a rain map and whatever. So pretty easy to integrate with real world APIs, devices or whatever, and do this stuff. There it is in the code base, and they're the main points you need to touch. So visually, I guess kind of what's happening. And the answer is this is the pattern. So I've done it all in one Flask root, so it's all happening in one block of code. You can break it out into 3 different blocks of code, or even 3 independent processes if you want. But the pattern is always the same. Give English, get instructions that, data that could be parsed by a machine, and instructions can be done from there. So in this case, forming Yahoo can be executed using these arguments. API call made, and results of API call go back to model with another prompt, and then model tell you what to do, and that's it. How does that scale? If you were to go building apps this way, is this a scalable pattern or just a nice project? It's actually a very scalable pattern. So what I've built is the 3 boxes and the octagon. What happens in Microsoft and Nvidia, the CEOs of those companies make many of these types of, they call experts, but really it's a prompt that can understand your English, or sorry, your language of choice, the instructions you've written in language, convert to an API call, and then the output of the API is again processed by the model and fed back to the user. So it can be the response can be, if you like, modified according to some context. And each of these API calls can be sat over a different database, so they can interact with a different system. And then by going through a routing prompt, depending on the type of question, it will know which agent to offload that question to, so that you can get the response you want. So in Microsoft's case, they can look at sales, metrics on operations and outages, employee databases, whatever. And the CEO can query one or more of these systems, and he can join the results together and ask for pie charts or whatever to be made out of that. So it's a really, really easy way to do, what you would build an awful lot of business logic to do. And again, it's pretty scalable and pretty simple to manage. Pros, said it all. It's fast to do it, scalable. User can create features without code. Once you get those results back, you can ask the language model to pick out 2 columns and make a pie chart or whatever. This is not hard to do. Your API is a strength and weakness. If it's done well, brilliant. If it's not, you're gonna have to do a bit of work in it. Glitches can occur, but they're not breakages. Just sometimes the model may not respond. Everyone has seen this if they've interacted with ChatGPT at all. Just simply resubmit the query and you get the answer. So it's kind of in that gray area. The real issue, I guess, is if you really need a super powerful model to process your data, you're either going to have to send it to the cloud, which you may not want to do, or it may be tricky to anonymize, or you're going to have to run the model on premise yourself, so that you don't send data over the network that way. So that presents challenges, but those costs may be possible to recuperate. So I'm going to try and compare. So if we think of the traditional stack, someone is using Spring or Django and a whole load of Angular on top of that, and some database package underneath that to access some database like Oracle or SQL or whatever. How does trying to modify or arrange features in that app compare with this pattern? So let's take a look at that. So if your user asks for a new feature, the critical thing here is the user, the person paying for this change, wants to get feedback as soon as possible, so they can see if the change is right, or if they need to add any more information to it. So if they could ask one developer directly on both stacks, it would take maybe a few days to do that. If you're very knowledgeable with the stack, one programmer could touch all the places, in the database, in Hibernate and Spring and Angular, and maybe deliver that feature. On the OpenAI prompt, it's a little easier to do. You just modify the prompt to understand something new, and then extract something different from the API. You normally don't just have one person you can tap up, and teams normally have split developers. There's usually front end and back end people. So the very best is you're probably going to need to talk to 2 people about it, and they may understand things differently. They have to split apart anyway. The feature has to be split into front end and back end changes, and then their changes need to integrate without creating any bugs, hopefully. And so that could take about 2 weeks to do that. And again, the challenge there is, do 2 people understand the thing the same way? On the OpenAI front, you kind of pair program on that one. You could do that the other way, but really you're just going to modify the prompt and the API. You could split up, you could pair program on that, but 2 is the max you'll ever need to do to change the OpenAI route. And it's very easy to kind of manage to change. So it's slightly more successful. I think just my experience of using it is this would be easier to do and easier to explain to people. Normally in a company, teams are between 4 and 7. You've got BAs involved. Look, the short answer to this is someone has to understand what the user is asking for perfectly. And then hopefully when they rewrite that explanation when they rewrite that into a story, developers can again understand that perfectly and integrate perfectly. And that does not happen. Communication doesn't work that way. And so, the time lag between each cycle gets bigger, and that means less feedback for the user, more expense. So immediately, even though a language model is expensive to run, you're going to save a bit of money if you do enough feature changes. If a company operates like this, then right, this is a rubbish way to do stuff. It doesn't put the user at the center of it. It's process heavy, and they don't get enough feedback. What I've done with OpenAI would absolutely destroy this model completely. It's just there's no comparison, none at all. What does it mean for techies and for their clients? It's a good question. For techies, everything we know about software engineering, managing code bases, patterns, object-oriented programming, all of that is designed around maintaining a code base so that we can keep making changes to it for as long as possible. If you lose key personnel, whoever had the vision for the architecture, for the code, for the strategy, if you lose that person, people may abandon the architecture and they just give up. So what we do to maintain code bases is expensive, and it doesn't always last indefinitely because everything has to get upgraded eventually. Either the hardware changes or we can't maintain the code base and we have to do a rewrite. That's the reality. In the 90s, we dreamed of having a coding language that was just like English. You could type in what you want to do and the computer compiler could just do that. So it's here now, like it's been realized that's what these prompts are like. You can ask for something to be done and it's done. So I don't see how you can stack those two things together for much longer if one is much easier to do. From the reality of the customer, they're paying to finance all these extra debates and all these processes. And again, it just lengthens the interval at which they can get feedback. So, and on top of that, there's all the tech debt that goes with a project, upgrades and outages and hardware and stuff. So while that's not completely eliminated, feature-wise, there's very little code to develop a feature on the OpenAI stack, and not a whole lot of tech debt. And if it's running against the cloud or whatever, the cloud's availability will negate many of these issues as well. So again, you're going to make a big saving there. And if someone else supplies your client with a solution like this and they're happy and it fulfills their needs, they're not going to be attached to any of the points we brought up. So comparing both of them, it's very hard to see genuinely how anyone will opt to pay way more money for an extremely heavy process. And while gaming companies and maybe Microsoft, when they develop something like Excel, they may not have an option to go this route. Those apps will have to go on. A lot of business applications don't need to go that route any longer and can go this route, and that's where money can be saved. And if companies want to do anything these days, it's save money. So again, from the perspective of the company making the software and from their clients, I can't see any attachment to the old way for much longer. Fears over using AI. Well, all of these things are true, but they don't stop you from doing what I've done in this project. I mean, these models just predict a response to a piece of text, however they're trained. And I don't think it's a good idea to tell people who ask, how can I make a bomb, to tell them how to make a bomb. I don't think that's a clever thing to do. But my point is, if you give a model a huge amount of text and in that is the instructions on how to make guns or bombs or whatever, and someone asks that question, the model will give out the answer because that's the predicted response. So you've either got to limit what you put into it, or train it first of all to, you know, be a really good model, get the weights right, and then feed it back in just a limited subset of information. I think GPT do that already for the O models, and which are more engineering focused. So they're getting better at doing this. They're not leaving the public interface as exposed, but definitely in this case, it does not weigh into it at all. So the conclusion is, well, here's my take on it. Rather than bend all your users to fit one interface that you've spent a year building in Angular, it's a hell of a lot easier to have a flexible interface that fits all users. That's cheaper to develop. That's the simplest way I can say it. It's easier to do this, and it's more flexible for the people who use it. So I think that's pretty much a slam dunk there. And if you don't do it, someone else will. So why be last when you can be, you know, not last? And that's it for any picture. Let me know your thoughts. I'm sure people will give me horrendous feedback for this, but it is what it is. Thank you.